Let us begin. Oh my goodness, this is like the weirdest time ever to like have a conversation or anything. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely,
like
man.
off the top, uh, how are you doing?
I'm good. Other than all the gigs being canceled, which I like playing gigs, so that's too bad. But I'm always
Yeah, you're
been one for.
amazing.
Go ahead, sir.
I was gonna say it's such a an amazing amount of energy that's transmitted by you on stage. I'm sure you get that from the crowd. That's a big part of like who you are as a circuit energetically. I didn't mean to like kind of like just jettison off there for a second. Please
Yeah,
continue.
yeah. No, I know what you mean, though. Yeah, I mean, you kind of live off it. Even if you're, I'm not like the most like gregarious on stage, but I definitely still get off on that. Performing in front of people, and for me, like I practice a lot, um, but like I really that needs to sort of be cut with performing and playing with other people because that's kind of what makes it real. Like the practicing is fun, and sometimes I feel like I'm getting better, but you don't really know how you're going to play with other people. So
That's an interesting observation. That sometimes we that, and also sometimes we can maybe improve slightly, and we don't notice it over
yeah,
time. Uh, I just one of the things, the subjects that I wanted to really jump into early with you was composition, if that's okay.
sure, man. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and so for me, a lot of my practice time these days is basically just composition.
Oh, cool.
Is that
Yeah.
the same for you, or do you tend to be more really like rigorous with like a discipline regarding how you use different portions of your time in practice? Like I feel like for me, I'm more on the lazy side of town a lot of times practice wise, but like if I'm just like picking and making up stuff, I feel like I'm using my time in a good way. I know I could use a lot more of the grunt work and all that kind of stuff. How do you feel like you look at how to divide your time that way?
You know, I feel like most people have a bent towards one way or the other, or like maybe you're in a certain zone for a long time, so it's hard to do the other thing. And for me, honestly, like the grunt work is the stuff that comes easy to me in terms of like I can sit down and practice like working on tunes, playing through changes, working on scales. Like I could kind of do that like infinitely and be satisfied.
So
And
it's not
actually,
grunt
like
work. You love
composing is
it.
something I have to make myself
Oh
do.
wow, how interesting! Wow, we're
Yeah,
it seems like when I listen to your compositions, they sound so fluid, that and maybe they do come that way. They don't sound labored over or anything. And if they are, that's a magnificent example of how to craft things in a meticulous way, but keep that flow. Please say more about those kind of things,
I mean, I appreciate that, man. I mean, I will say that, like, for instance, when I was writing the tunes for my one record I have,
which is
I wrote
fantastic. Yes,
most of
sir.
them, like, in the 3 or 4 months before we rehearsed with the band, with Stash and Alex and Jeff. And so, at that point, I got in, like, a zone when it comes to the writing where, like, that was what I was doing every day when I picked up my axe. So I will say that, like, you know, I was forcing myself to write because I had to, because I had a recording session coming up, but also like I got in the habit, and so thus it wasn't like it didn't take a lot of discipline to do it every day because it was already a habit. I talk about this with Stash actually, like how it's really hard to be in both like a practicing kind of like grunt work zone and in a composing zone at once. Like we both
Yeah,
feel like we're sort of in one or the other,
yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe
yeah. Jumping
creative days
hemispheres, maybe.
or years.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I wish I could do that where I would like practice a couple hours and then write for an hour, but it tends to be more like I practice for a lot longer than that, and then there's a few weeks where maybe I write a bunch, but I can't
I
like
dig
on
it.
a day-to-day basis. I have trouble doing both.
Yeah, yeah. I got to brag on you just a little bit to the people that maybe new to your music, and and that kind of stuff. I think you're the kind of musician that's, on the Michael Jordan kind of level of what you're doing, in the sense that you're very, very naturally gifted, and then just practicing all the time to expand, all the time. It's not like, I got this thing, and which can be beautiful too when someone has a, a gift and maybe they don't ever even practice with it. I heard Bobby Osborne, I know my video is frozen right now, but I'm going to keep talking. I heard Bobby Osborne talking about he would go to the opera and not practice singing, and he's just like, well, you either got it or you don't. You step on stage and there it is. I was like, well, Hoss, that don't work for me the same way it does with you.
Yeah. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. I mean, you're kind of stuck with whatever talent you have, and like most of my friends, I would say, are really talented. Like, just because if you're still playing music when you're like 30, early 30s, you have to have gotten somewhere to have stuck with it and be able to make a living. So, all my friends, are, I would say, really talented. And, most of them are a combination of, like, they're naturally good at these things, and then they're really good at working on these other things.
Yeah.
I have a couple friends, I won't say names, Alex Hargraves. It's kind of ridiculous how he can be good at everything. And, like, he practices, and he practices really focused, but he doesn't practice as much as some of my other friends, but everyone's, including myself, is always like, how the hell is he so good at styles? So I know some pretty extreme people, but in general, I feel like most of my buddies are talented and they practice on top of that. Because, to be around the caliber of folks I'm fortunate to be around, I never feel like whatever talent I have is nearly enough to carry me through. So I definitely feel like I need to keep on working on it.
Well, that's such an interesting common facet of the human experience, to sustain motivation, inwardly, although it is such a fine line between, wanting to push yourself and then being mean to yourself. And say, oh, you're not good enough, and be like, oh, well, and someone else could be like, well, just, look at this album you made, it's freaking, or this one song, or, and everybody has those moments creatively. I think everybody's got kind of like a creativity within them, and to me,
right,
like being so obsessed with the mandolin, I don't understand why it's not more a lot of people being obsessed with the mandolin, because it's so easy, to kind of get started and all that kind of stuff. And so, one of the, there's a dreamlike quality that you can connect with the mandolin because of how easy it can be to play and to improvise. I try to play a little bit on all kinds of instruments, but for some reason I'm like I can get to more of what I can hear in my head on the mandolin. So
right.
it's like a beautiful channel that we have in common there, and I just it's very rare to find someone who's on this kind of same path, coming at it from a very, very different angle though. And so, like,
sure.
For instance, I found myself in the beautiful dreamy hills of Dorrigo, Australia, playing my mandolin, a mile down the road from this rainforest, and then, a couple years later, you're doing the same thing, and these people love mandolin out there. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? That was a really special experience for me up there. Was that profound for you?
Yeah, man, it was amazing. I went over with my group, and it was actually with Ross Martin on guitar, subbing for Stash.
Okay. Right.
And sorry.
Oh yeah. I'd forgotten the Stash didn't go on that trip. Sorry.
Yeah, he couldn't go on that one, but that was amazing. It was it was pretty surreal too for us because it was literally a weekend trip to Australia because we had to do a tour here in the States after that. So we left on Monday and got back on Monday. And that's it.
You must
that's
be
like
tired. That's pretty.
A lot of that's traveling.
The
bulk of that's traveling. So, but the days we had there were incredible. The coffee, the food.
Right.
I mean, yeah, the rainforest.
The flat white
and then
mate.
Sorry?
The flat white mate, right?
One more time, I'm sorry.
Did you get the flat white? That was my coffee over there.
Yeah, constantly. Yeah,
yeah.
3-4 a day at least. Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big coffee guy, and my band, I'm relentless about stopping at every good coffee shop we can on the road. It's a nice thing about a dictatorship band like I have. You know? There's no about it.
I would jump in there because I want to compliment you on your band leading abilities or your dictatorship, however it plays out. I suspect it's a very good situation for these amazing folks that want to play with you and be a part of what you're doing up there, which is so bold and makes so much sense because it's so much a synthesis of so many good things. And I wanted to, if you felt comfortable talking about how you think about managing like creative risk. To me is an interesting subject. Like how do you know yourself well enough to decide when certain thresholds have been crossed, like energetically with regard to how you express yourself, either lyrically or melodically, and like how you become comfortable with certain things maybe you weren't comfortable with at the beginning, and just how you kind of manage like how far you go out there without freaking yourself and your friends and your people who support you out.
Man, that's a question. First off, I didn't really ever think I wanted to lead a band. But yeah, when I was in Yonder Mountain, I felt a need to be a part of a project with like my peers, guys I'd grown up with.
Yeah.
And so the easiest way at that point was to start my own project, and actually had some ability to book it based on getting my name out there with Yonder.
Hard work.
I guess I feel like I've been a part of several projects where, to some degree, and hopefully we don't need to edit this out, but the band felt like it needed to do a certain thing in order to be successful and gain fans.
Yeah, like make potatoes. I've heard songwriters talk about, like, I make potatoes. When people want potatoes, they come to me. You don't give them something that's not good to you.
But, like, in at least the projects I'd been part of, trying to direct it towards something that we think would, sell or capitalize on, maybe like the Mumford & Sons market or something like that. It never really seemed like it worked. And at points it was, it seemed like we weren't even fully taking advantage of some of the gifts the band did have, and so I guess all that to say, with my band, to a large degree, we just do whatever I want to do, and it's not a great amount of credence is given to what I think will be appealing, even, basically it's just like the sound that's in my head.
Dig it, and they trust you, and they trust where that sound's coming from too.
Well, hopefully, and I definitely employ guys in the band that, I respect all their opinions a lot, and they're all strong enough voices and to weigh in on the fronts, in terms of, are we doing too many fast tunes? Are we doing, is there not enough soloing, too much soloing, or, does this harmony part sound right or not? So I definitely, I kind of abide by the, I think it's the Grisman philosophy of a leading a band, which is, everybody gets an opinion, nobody gets a vote.
Wow, I've never heard that like that, but he, again, such a remarkable band leader and philosopher.
Say it again?
Such a remarkable band leader and philosopher. That's a great one to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he's a big idol for me for sure. But I guess the other thing about having a band is where there's someone in charge is I've found it to be 100% easier than being part of a democratic band. Maybe it's not easier for the people in my band, but so much time in some other bands I've been in has gotten wasted sort of voting on stuff and arguing about stuff. And I really like the model with my band is that I take everyone's opinion really seriously, but if we want to try a song or want to try it in sound check, I'm going to decide how to do it. and we're not going to like argue about it for a long time.
Yeah,
You know?
here's a question that kind of plays into that because I love that idea of it's kind of like, well, if I was if I was you or I was anybody and I was like I'm holding auditions and you're gonna come play for me and people like hear the tunes and then people came and they're like these are amazing tunes, I love them, I want to play in your band, and they'd be like, oh, you'd be like, okay, well here's how that all seems natural. But the place that I get fouled up is trying to understand the balance, and I would love to hear you play some mandolin. Thank you so much for bringing your mandolin out today.
Oh, no worries, man. No, I'm just used to having it.
Yeah. Is how much, and I feel like I made this mistake a lot in my band leading past, not understanding when and how to let people do what they're good at versus get them to try to do what I want them to do. How does that work for you?
And I mean, I do think my band it's probably just a little bit less strict stylistically than a lot of bluegrass groups. Whereas, like,
good point.
Some of my favorite bluegrass bands, Del McCurry Band, Johnson Mountain Boys, people like that. It's like there's a lot of stuff that if those players had played it wouldn't sound right.
It's true. Yeah. Right.
And it just wouldn't fit, and it just wouldn't sound as good, And I think the Del McCurry Band's really great at being really creative within the style.
Good point.
With my band, I do think there's just a little bit more of anything goes.
It's exciting.
In that you play some kind of wild instrumental music that gets about as out as you could, with Stash involved, especially,
Yeah. All right.
And then we'll play a lot of trad bluegrass tunes. But even within that, the improvisation is definitely coming from a pretty like jazz influenced place.
Yeah. Unlimited.
So I guess
love that.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just unlimited. I feel some of that same freedom when I play with Peter because he just loves what's good in the moment.
Totally. Yeah, and I think in terms of like the guys I get, this I feel like is also part of a Grisman quote. His 75th birthday was yesterday, so I've been thinking about him a lot.
Oh, wow,
But, like, I've never really told any of the guys in my band how to play other than a few very particular things that, like, man, I'd like this kickoff to be more melody. Mm-hmm. Or, we're going to take a certain approach to the solos on this one. But, like, for the most part, I've never really tried to change the way any of them play because I feel like by the time I called them for the gig, I already knew what they sounded like.
Yeah.
And, like,
right, you liked them. They were making good decisions. Yeah. So
unlike guitar,
go ahead,
like
please.
Stash, kind of my like main dude.
Yeah.
But then
Genius.
the guy that does the most with me beyond Stash is probably Jake Stargell, and they're
Wonderful. Very different.
really opposite.
Yeah. And that can be fun to kind of play off of. I know that certainly worked for Bill Monroe and his favorite a lot. He worked with a lot of different people and was inspired and creatively, compositionally, so many different things. Here's a question about style and like when you're coming into a theme or a composition. How do you decide if you're comfortable with something or not? Like, how do you make
just
that
like
decision?
aesthetically like comfortable with it?
Yeah, because sometimes I just wrestle with that. I'm like, don't know how to make the decision.
And I mean, I have by some standards, I feel like I have a sort of a tendency to make stuff kind of over the top. Like, I don't think I'm on the reserved side.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, too, because, like, when I was in Yonder, one of the critiques I would get from fans is that he's, like, look like a statue and don't look like I'm into it.
Oh, jeepers.
Yeah, which is kind of the opposite critique I get from a lot of musicians, so...
Yeah! How interesting. What people look for in terms of... Maybe they're, looking for someone who's going to really be, like, just going as wild as you're playing, or as dynamic as you're playing. Like you have to move your body the same way that you're moving your fingers, but not the case.
Yeah. It's fun. I mean, the jam band community. It's a very particular type of scene, and I think the physical
diplomatically related. Yes, sir.
The physical act of performing is something that's taken really seriously within that scene, and that is really not me. Like, I don't. If I were to jump around around in the way that some of like like Billy, who's a great musician, he has a way of like emoting physically when he plays.
Indeed.
That if I do it, it would be totally put on. So like
I feel you. Yeah.
I think it looks
Same.
awesome when he does it, but I wouldn't personally.
Exactly.
It wouldn't fit me.
Yeah. I feel that same way, and
Yeah.
do enjoy it. When he gets into it, and
Absolutely.
and wonder sometimes, well, if maybe if I did that, maybe more people would come to my shows. I wonder that for a second, but and you don't go any further with it because, like you say, it would be a construction at that point. Although at the same point, I'm like, where is my maybe I can do a dance on stage, or like maybe I can I don't know, integrate that into the show somehow, and maybe that's like an interesting shadowy kind of like blind spot or inspiration point that, of course, I'm getting a little bit navel gazing now. Sorry about that.
No, you're right. I've thought about it for sure. I mean, I spent 6 years touring with Yonder and never once started to move any more than the day I started. And that's not without some amount of encouragement from people that I should. You're not necessarily the band, but just like fans.
Sure.
And it's honestly like I'm also a little bit like if someone tells me to do something, especially of that nature, I'm gonna do the exact. And so, but no, I've just sort of embraced the fact that like moving a lot is not necessarily part of how I play, and honestly, the way I'm trying to focus when I'm playing, it doesn't really lends itself to moving a whole bunch either. So
I feel you there. Yeah, your facility and how you're able to pull off the up and down the neck passages, just super fast, super clean with a lot of power. You can't jump around and do that. It's if it's not impossible. I've never seen it done. It's like you've got to sit there and really focus on these tiny little subtle movements, and you can't really just jump around too much into doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that said, Thea Lee, he moves at an amazing amount for how perfect he plays.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And I mean, I guess he's got to optimize because he's been doing that the whole way. He's been moving that way. It's like his language.
He's done
like
that.
They're one, like the movement. And, yeah.
But I feel like I'm working about as hard as I can all the time.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Jeepers, absolutely. So let's, if you're okay with it, let's switch gears. We've got about 10 minutes left because I know you've got a Skype student that's coming up here, and we want to remind everybody to check out jacobjolliff.com with 2 F's. I'll put that information on here if I can, and then Instagram too, Facebook. And you can take lessons with Jacob right here, like today. You can probably call him and you have to work that out. So that's an amazing thing. I'm getting a lesson here today, and this is fantastic. If we can switch gears just slightly, because I'm a tree person, and I like to talk about trees, and and this is a beautiful, significant, although sometimes overlooked or hidden, subtle. Powerful part of what we're all doing with this music is we're working with wood. We're working with trees. And I know my videos kind of fouled up there for a second, but I'm going to keep talking about trees for a second. So you're playing a beautiful Gilchrist mandolin there that has a probably some sort of spruce top on it, right?
Man, I think so. I'm really bad with mandolin construction in woods.
I'm about level 1 too. Yeah, no worries.
I know it's basically modeled after the one that Ronnie
plays. That's such a fantastic one, yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing one. And I actually honestly feel like the only mandolin I've played that's better than this since I got it was that one.
Wow. How cool is that?
I haven't played any lures or anything in the last couple years, but this is a really nice one. I got it in 2017. So,
yeah, wow. Yeah. And it mic's fantastic, and it must play well because you're all over it, and that's so fantastic. And then guessing that the back is maple. Hey, just guessing off so nice.
Looks like it, but like I said, I'm not good with knowing.
Oh, that's so beautiful. He is such a master. Would you mind?
I mean, he really is.
What is your relationship with trees like?
Relationship with trees, man. It hasn't been something I thought a whole lot about. I mean, I'm from the West Coast, where there's a lot of pine trees.
Right. Right.
I haven't lived here for 12 years. I went to college out east, and then but I'm back here right now to get out of New York City for a few weeks. But
Smart move there.
But trees, man, I don't know. To be honest, like everyone in my family likes to hike more than I do.
Well, you hike music. You hike, creatively.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. Yeah, give it a shot.
And to me, one thing that I love to think about is so much of the tone that we love is what the trees are sounding like, what the wood sounds like, and so I have a fascination with nature in that way, and and also the connection between nature and country music, and just a real connection to the earth, which I feel like is the center of where my creative force comes from, like the earth, or to me that translates, resonating with the idea of whatever the Holy Spirit is, whatever that lightning bolt that comes through, the inspiration, or whatever that is. It's just like, boom, here is this song, or here is this moment, or you're watching someone do something that is so moving that you're getting goosebumps or electricity through your, all that kind of, like, wherever that's coming from. That's not a forced thing. That's a kind of a miraculous thing to me. How do you feel about all that kind of stuff?
Man, it's funny that we should talk about this, because I'm like about as big of a city person as they get. Like, I'm like, and I really play it up a lot of the times. Like, I act like I hate hiking, hate nature, which I don't by any. It's just sort of a drawn out bit of humor, but I love being in the city. Like, I'm like as big of a city fan as they come. I can survive being like in the city in like my neighborhood for like, without going nuts, for I'd say longer than almost anyone I know, whatever that means. I mean, that said, when people drag me out into nature to hike or to go for a run or something, I do enjoy that too. But
I totally dig that, because there's so much electricity in the city. There's so much inspiration available in the city, and so much of that was the engine powering jazz and bebop and that kind of like furious improvisation, which I feel like you have such a magnificent channel with. Like, I feel like you've got this amazing technical facility, but you're also like way deep in the language of jazz in a way that I've never heard anybody do it before. Of course, there's some good jazz mandolin players, from Jethro and whoever, on and on. Many modern mandolin masters, chordal masters, all that kind of stuff. But so much of that kind of language resonates with the city, hey?
Absolutely, man. No, I totally agree. In fact, I started noticing that a couple years ago when I would listen to a lot of jazz as I walked around New York, which is kind of like part of my daily thing. Is
no better place to do it, I guess, right?
Yeah, you kind of have to walk a lot in New York, and then I listen to jazz by default all the time anyway, but the two go together really well. Probably because that's where it was, came from. It's just like that's in particular.
Yeah, like,
and listening to
cornbread in South Carolina. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
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 So,
but the thing is, Bluegrass is just as close to my heart, if not, probably way more so, honestly, because I grew up with it. And
the family ties is big.
Yeah, but say it again. Sorry.
The family ties thing that's big, and that connection to family and community.
So I was just a little bit of this standard I've been working on today. Is that all right?
Absolutely, man. Yeah. What you got?
Yeah, we'll see. See how it goes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Wow. Flawless victory. That was perfect. That's
Not
fantastic.
quite, but
Well, I mean, like, it goes by fast enough that I could tell. You said that was a standard. Hey,
yeah. It could happen to you.
it could happen to you. Wow,
Yeah.
that was so amazing. And for folks that are watching this that want a little insight into how you do that, here's how you do that. You go to jacobjolliff.com and send him a message, and you ask him, how do I do that?
That's right, man.
That's where to go. But that was just so amazing and fluid. And how does it feel to be able to do that? How does it feel in your hands and like your spirit, like when you're doing that? What does that make you feel like?
Well, I just learned that tune like a couple days ago. So I don't know if when you memorize the lyrics to a tune, until you sing it in front of people,
Sure.
It's impossible to feel like confident that you're going to remember the words. At least that's how it is for me.
Yeah.
I can sing it a million times, but until I've sang it on stage once,
Yeah.
I have zero confidence I'm going to remember it. And that's kind of how it is with the new tune, especially playing solo for me too. Like when there's no bass or drums or anything to lean on or guitar,
Right.
so like I just learned it. So to me, honestly, like my only goal in playing it just now was to not completely fall to pieces.
Wow.
It's largely my goal in general, but I love it too, though. Playing solo, it's definitely its own kind of adrenaline rush because you're like always on the edge of falling off.
That's right. That's right.
So.
And this just goes to show that when you hear it a lot of times, people. The aspect about performing, and this can even stem into or go into shamanism, this idea about creating an acceptable illusion of perfection.
Yeah.
Because here I am, I've got pretty good ears, and I couldn't hear one thing that was wrong with that at all, like honestly, and that's
appreciate that. And I definitely respect your ears and ability to especially when it comes to listening to a mandolin player. So that means a lot, but it's you learn like with any tune, like fiddle tune or jazz tune, or you learn like one way you can get through it and survive.
Right.
But the best players, your Stuart Duncans or your John Coltrane's, or they have like a million different ways they can get through something without falling to pieces.
Right.
And it's just sort of trying to add ways I can get through something, ways that different approaches. And so the key is but I think a lot of really great players, though, maybe they just can do like 2 or 3 things, but they can do it really well. And you don't necessarily, when you're hearing someone really nail something, you're not necessarily thinking, oh, there's all this other shit they could be doing too,
Right.
But you're just hearing them, oh, they're really nailing that thing they're going for.
Right. I would think that would tend I would tend to fall into that category about quite happily. Sometimes.
Here, man. For sure,
a lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah, the degree to which I can play through jazz changes is like the equivalent to like a lot of like 9 or 10-year-old saxophone players around the country.
Wow, what an interesting analogy, and just being I know you for years took lessons or studied with someone a jazz master, right? I can't remember what that person's name was off the top of my head. I remember you talking about it in an interview.
Yeah, I've done couple different times. In high school, I took some lessons from a piano player that was amazing named Randy Porter. And then, ironically, when I was at Berkeley, I didn't work on jazz that much.
What were you doing up there, just out of curiosity? What was going on?
I'm sorry?
What was the goal? Like, how did you occupy your time up there?
I mean, I practiced all the time. I was kind of like, I'd say my first couple years at Berkeley was when I was sort of just obsessed with trying to get the kind of facility that Thea Lee has on the mandolin before totally kind of giving up.
Sure, right. Which is what happens, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was part of my phase, and then
although to me, even with my mandolin years, I put you for what I have been able to hear, like kind of everybody has their different style and everything, but jeepers, I mean, like you and Thea Lee and Dave Apollon, it's like you can play like as much as you could hear, or anybody could hear, more than people could hear, like that's in a good way. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like even with someone who can play anything, like Thea Lee, like he still plays like what he wants to hear, and he still has spent a lot of time on certain things like classical music and bluegrass. And I think it's a godsend that he hasn't spent 10 years just playing jazz, or else he'd probably ruin that for the rest of his piano players too. Like, so as long as no matter how good you get, everyone's allocating their time a little differently, and so you're going to have strengths, and so even he,
absolutely. So if you had one little thing to leave people with here in their quarantine state, I'm hoping I'm going to be able to put this up in short order here. What would you leave them with in terms of maybe some mandolin inspiration or words of wisdom that you've collected in your walk with the mandolin and music from down on through the years?
I think it comes down to just getting in the zone with whatever you're doing. If it's like music or writing or tennis or whatever, and some of those things are easier to do in a quarantine state than others. Playing the mandolin in my room, I could do through most quarantines, or so.
Right.
That I just think that anything that encourages you to get into the zone, and I would feel like social media, being on your phone is sort of like the opposite of getting into a zone.
Anti-zone. Yeah.
As in, like, nothing makes me feel worse than looking at my phone for an hour. Nothing makes me feel better than like practicing for an hour.
Wow.
So I think just encouraging people to practice something, and getting, and that doesn't mean like running scales, but just to like spend time like kind of solo endeavor, improving something. There's like an inherent good there, and also it passes the time, to put it in quarantine terms. It's just like I'm pretty good at practicing all day, and so I'm right now, like, I can still do that, but even though I can't go out and see people, so play an instrument, practice an instrument. That's what I would leave people with.
Yeah, and folks, get on the website jacobjolliff.com and send him a message if you want to learn some beautiful mandolin, and so I'll just say a word before I stop the recording here. But we'd like to thank Jacob for spending this time with us, and we really appreciate it. So thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Chris. I'm a big fan of your playing as well, so I really appreciate you reaching out and having me on here.
That's mighty kind. I appreciate that a lot. So I'll sign off here, but I'll say a word to you before we hang up.